Hey, welcome back. And today we're going to be talking about the Doge 8 tube preamplifier. Now this is solely a preamplifier. I think it's one of the most fantastic tube preamplifiers out there right off the bat. But again, this is just my opinion and this is just my audiophile experience. So we're going to break this down to things I like about the unit and things I don't like about the unit. So let's start off with the things I like. So first thing, I love the fact that these preamplifiers come in RCA version or XLR version. So this means that if you want balance, if you want XLR, you can get the XLR version or you can get the RCA version. What I have here is the XLR version. They also seem to have added home theater bypass. So if you need home theater bypass in your preamplifiers, then they've added that as well. So there's that. But I honestly don't see that as a positive because I don't use home theater bypass as much. Number two, it's very reasonable in price. So whether you go with the RCA version or the XLR version, it's gonna be under $2,000 before shipping. And that is extremely reasonable for a tube preamplifier of this quality. So I'm just gonna open it up here inside. And I guess this is the third part, the third reason I like about this unit, the quality of parts. So inside here, you see all genuine parts here, WEMA and Clarity audio capacitors. Oh boy, Clarity audio capacitors. So the Clarity audio capacitor used here is pretty much identical to the Clarity audio capacitor grades used in the Sonos Fabric Electile Motors that I reviewed recently, which is a $10,000 speaker. And not to mention the silver wire array inside, that's all very neat, just absolutely beauty inside. And that's precisely one of the reasons I decided to review this unit in the first place. Because I saw the picture of the inside components and I was like, Clarity audio capacitors in a preamplifier that's under $2,000. So for those of you that don't know, they also make a DAC called the Doge 7 DAC. So this is the Doge 8 preamplifier and there's the Doge 7 DAC that I reviewed last year, I think. I'll link in the description below. And that DAC also had Clarity audio capacitors and beautiful components inside. It was one of the best DACs I've quite frankly heard in this price point. And that's why it won the best award. And best awards are awards that's given to products that punch way above its price point. But we're not gonna be giving out best awards anymore. The award system has changed a little bit. From now on, we're gonna make it more kind of hard for products to get any type of award. It's gonna have to stay in my system for long periods of time that I choose to use. So it's going to be awards that's given later throughout the year that I choose as my year-end component that will stay in my system for the year. And the Doge 8 very much be it, but we don't know just yet. So don't think that just because I'm not giving a best award to this product that this product is not on the same level. In fact, I would put this on a higher caliber than the Doge 7 DAC in a lot of ways in terms of value proposition. And that's the fourth point, I guess, value proposition. I think we kind of already tied that in here. But again, value proposition can't emphasize enough. One of the best values. And to kind of explain that a little bit more, in fact, these preamplifiers and Doge components were actually sold under a brand name called Lua for quite a bit of time. It was an Italian brand and they sold it the almost exact same thing with price that was about $7,000 or so, $5,000, $7,000. So you're essentially getting a component that is worth about $5,000, $7,000 at the time under the Lua brand for a lot less because Doge now is a company that themselves that's selling directly to you. So essentially they have adopted the consumer direct business model. Now, that's not all. In fact, under the Lua brand, they used to use WEMA capacitors and other components that were not as high-end as is in this unit. So they have, in fact, changed the core components to a higher degree and to keep themselves competitive and push themselves to a higher standard. So really, a company like this is really nice to have, and it's enlightening to have these type of quality components inside. Now again, some of you guys have pointed out in the past of my Doge 7 DAC that Clarity audio capacitor is not the highest grade of DACs. And I agree. There are much higher grade DACs, but to fit into a chassis like this, that's pretty compact, standard size unit, and also in a tube preamplifier that costs under $2,000, I think that is pretty high standard. I mean, we have these clarity audio capacitors inside a $10,000 speaker, and many, $10,000, $20,000 speakers like PMC, Focal, and so on. But enough about the value proposition. I believe we're on the 5th point now on the reason why I like this, and that is that this is a tube preamplifier. Tube preamplifier is probably one of my favorite components ever, aside from speakers, of course. And that's because when you make a tube preamplifier with a solid state amplifier like a Class D, Class A, Class AB, you name it, you get the best of both worlds. You get that holographic sound, sound stage, and 3D holographicness that I talk about with tubes all the time. And if you're lucky, if the tube preamplifier is good enough, you get that sweetness on the top end as well. And with a good solid state amplifier mashed with a tube preamplifier, oh my goodness, you get the bass authority, grip, and black background. And honestly, synergistically speaking, it's a beautiful match. And I think we're on the 6th reason now, or something like that, of what I like about this unit. It has a phono stage, okay? At this price point, it has a moving magnet and moving coil tube phono stage. That's unheard of. You know how much it costs for a tube phono stage? MC, let alone Turntable lovers know what I'm talking about. It costs a fortune. This actually has a decent, very decent phono stage. So if you want to run turntables, absolutely love it. And it's actually pretty quiet too. Tube phono stage in a tube preamplifier. Just absolutely incredible. Now let's move on to the things I don't like about this unit, and that's the looks. First thing, the looks. I don't like how bland it looks. It has beautiful components inside and it's covered by this metal, it would be nice if they have like an acrylic top where you can see the components, the tubes and all. The clarity capacitor, because inside is a masterpiece, but outside it looks quite bland. If I didn't open this unit up and show it to you, or if they didn't have pictures, I'm almost guaranteed the sales would drop and nobody would buy this. In fact, it would have not even gathered my interest to review it in the first time. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I hate these pillars. I absolutely hate these pillars. These pillars, I don't know what, they kind of clamp onto the top. I get it gives you like isolation from the thing not ringing. I get it, resonance control, I guess. But there's 4 pillars here. I don't like the look of these pillars, and I just don't like how many screws are on here. There's too many screws. I mean, if you want to get to the tube, to change the tube, if you're a tube roller like me that wants to change tubes to see the effects and stuff like that, it's just not practical. It's not like the Burson units where you take like two screws out and you're set to change the op amps. Here you have to change, you have to take out all the screws. How many screws are here? Too many screws. And that's how many. Just too many screws. And the third thing that I don't like about this unit is that it's not a true balanced design. So this is a converter, essentially what they call a fake XLR. So this is not a true balanced design. That's why the price difference between the RCA and the XLR is only $200, $300. So unless you want to run long lengths of cables with balanced cables, for extra grounding, I don't really see a reason for it. I would rather have RCA because RCA has less tubes, less compromises on the board because this is a pretty small chassis to work with. And I actually wanted to test out the differences between the RCA version and the XLR version, so they're going to be sending me the RCA version. So we'll wait for that and come right back. It's finally here. So I don't know about you guys, but the Doge 8 and virtually every other Doge kind of ships with this wooden crate, and I think that's kind of excessive. I mean, I get high-end stuff in here all the time and they don't ship it like this. I get it, the protection is great. I mean, I would rather have the extra protection, but this I think presumably adds to the cost, and I don't really think there should be a need for it. But comment down below, let me know what you guys think. So I set up the RCA version just now, and at my first listen, you know what? Smile to my face, better than the XLR version. And I'm talking about pretty darn like way better. Now, my main complaint, like I said, with the XLR version is two things. First, it's a little bit bright sounding. Second, it's not truly balanced design. Now, if I want an XLR output, I want true balanced design. The price difference between the RCA version and the XLR version is not that much. You know, you're basically getting like XLR conversion. Now, they do it better than most companies with the XLR conversion. However, I'm just not a fan of this fake XLR. Now, granted, it is difficult to get a fully balanced tube preamplifier. So, maybe in the future, but my recommendation right now is the cheaper RCA version. Now, they sent me the RCA version, but they also told me they made some changes. So the first change they made was they upgraded the component, and second, they made the overall tuning a little bit more warmer because I complained that, well, I didn't complain, but I told them that for my liking, it's a little bit too bright. I love the Doge 7, but I didn't really love the Doge 8. I liked it. So now, the RCA version here, I love it. Now the tube that comes with it is this, the TAD German tube. It's a very decent tube, okay? And I like this about Doge. Now you can buy both units, RCA or XLR version, with no tubes. Or you can get this tube with it. You know, I like that instead of, having a crappy stock tube that really comes in as a throwaway. That's just added cost for no reason. Here, you get an option. You want to use your own tubes or you want to get some tubes that we recommend. Now, I do really like this tube. With this tube, however, it's just on the edge of bright, right? All the micro nuances, detail, air is there, but just on the edge of bright. Now, we're just talking about the RCA version now, okay? Just forget about the XLR version. So, the TAD, just on the edge of bright. And I said, you know what, guys? I think you nailed the tuning this time. This is perfect. I don't think you should change anything. But for my personal liking, the brightness level is just on the edge with the TAD. Now they said, hey, look, try this tube, which is the Brimar new old stock tube. They said, try this tube and tell us what you think. I tried this tube and immediately, no longer on the edge of bright. It's not bright. Warm, luscious, and instead of the word bright, I would use sweet sounding. And in fact, that's the word you used when you first listened to it, right? Tujin?
Yeah, especially when we were using the Sonos Favorite speakers.
Exactly, and I didn't say anything to you, right?
Nothing at all.
Exactly, and I was surprised too, because that's the first word he said. He's like, that sounds sweeter than my Hegel.
Yeah.
So anyways, so I find this tube phenomenal with this preamplifier. Again, RCA version, not the XLR version. Now, I would imagine they're going to implement the overall tuning to the XLR version too, but there is compromises when you use a converter, whether it's be a tube converter or, cable converter or whatever it is, there is a compromise. So I find that the RCA version is the way to go if you're going to buy a tube amplifier purely based on performance. If you're using for long lengths of cables, sure, you may need XLR, then go with the XLR version. That's my recommendation. Now, I have to say, I would not personally, this is my personal thing, I will not purchase this unit without the Brimar tube. That's just me, right? If you like a little bit more detailed presentation, a little bit more brighter, then sure, TAD is better. And TAD is better with the overall brighter detail retrieval. Like there's more micro nuances. But the Brimar, like Tujin and I said, just sweeter sounding. So personally, for my liking, I will not buy this unit without the Brimar. In fact, I will not listen to the unit without the Brimar, quite frankly. That's just me. Now, DAC I'm using right now is the May Hollow Audio May DAC. Now, this is a bit of an overkill. This is their flagship DAC, right? But I'm very familiar now with this DAC because I've been, listening to it, kind of evaluating it for a long time. And the amplifier I'm using right now is the NAD C298, which is a Class D amplifier. And I find it to be the most neutral Class D amplifier, and that's why I'm using it. And a lot of people like to, quite frankly, match tube preamplifiers with Class D amplifiers or solid-state amplifiers. It's just a really nice match. So I like it too, and so that's why I'm using it. Now the speakers, a little spoiled by Tujin over there, but the speakers I'm using right now is these. Oh, baby. So I did a full video on this, so you can check it out. I'll link it in the description, but oh, baby. Just this smile is not fake.
It's true love.
I can't stop smiling. Okay, so let's talk about the sound. And why haven't I talked about the sound earlier? Well, I actually have talked about the sound earlier, but I actually scratched that portion of the video because it's no longer relevant. They've made changes to it, so now I have to talk about the new sound. Well, the new sound, like I said, is warmer, so the brightness is no longer a concern. And I really love this new sound. It's just a classic tube preamplifier sound that's high quality. And the soundstage is large, holographic, like a tube preamplifier should. The mid-range is a sweetness, and the thing about tube preamplifiers, or really any tube device, is that when it's good, the holographic soundstage allows you to feel like the singer is in the room. I know, classy, classic, terminology that audiophiles use, but it's there for a reason. And honestly, tube units do that. Tube gear makes you feel like you're in the room with the performance that's taking place. And it really does that. This does it perfectly. I absolutely love it. It's almost spooky in a way. Kind of gives you that run down the spine effect. So yeah, it's really good. The high frequency is no longer bright, like I said, it's refined, however. My concern was that they're gonna tune it warm and then the high frequency sparkle was not going to be there anymore. But no, they actually nailed the tuning, so the high frequency sparkle is still there, the sweetness is still there. And just to be clear, like Tujin said, the sweetness there is there, but you don't get this with every tube preamplifier. You only get it with certain ones that's really good. And I've really had a handful of experiences with tube preamplifiers that had this type of sweetness. The sweetness level is top notch, and honestly one of the best tube preamplifiers I've heard to date in this price bracket. I would say under $5,000 US. Yeah, that's where I would put it. When you A/B it with other preamplifiers in that price category, it's definitely not gonna lose. It's definitely not going to be ashamed. It's going to stand its ground, and yes, some may prefer the more expensive tube preamplifiers, but by a small margin. This will compete with any preamplifier, in my opinion, to a high degree. Give some trouble. So let's talk about some comparisons, right? So when it comes to bass on a tube preamplifier is one of my biggest concerns, because usually it's not the best. Let's put it this way. Now the Doge 8 is somewhat good. It's good. Like, it's not lacking in bass, but again, it's not going to give you that extra bass, if you so will, with solid tube amplifiers. Solid preamplifiers. Jesus, what's going on with me? However, when you compare it to something like, for example, the Modwright. Now, Modwright LS100 is a tube preamplifier I've had for quite a bit of time. I love that unit, but the bass is just, how would I put it? How can I be not mean about this? Lumpy. Now that just came out wrong. It's not very good. It's not very tight. It doesn't have much control. And it has a very classic tube characteristic. Yes, it's warm, it's luscious. I would say even more than the Doge 8. It's more luscious than the Doge 8. But then at the expense of clarity, at the expense of sweetness, at the expense of, everything else. The soundstage is great, mid-range is great, but that's about it. The bass is lacking. And that's one of the reasons I sold it, is because I just don't see it happening in my system, because bass is important for me, clarity is important for me. If I cared about tube soundstage and that's all I cared about, then the Modwright would have been it. but that's also very expensive. That's 5,000 Canadian dollars. I don't know how much it is in the US, but you know, you can look it up. Another comparison, the Schiit Freya Plus. Now that's $1,000 tube preamplifier. So that's a comparison. You know, the Doge is about double, slightly, yeah, something like that with the upgraded tube. I was never a fan of Schiit Freya Plus. I know a lot of people like it, so don't shoot me. It's just my personal taste, my audiophile journey, right? Don't have to listen to me. What do I know? But in my opinion, to my experience, the Schiit Freya Plus never impressed me. It's a tube preamplifier that sounds more solid state than tube. And what I mean by that is, yes, it's holographic. It still has that tube holographic soundstage, but it doesn't have anything else. That's just how I see it. Bass is tight. Bass is tighter than the Modwright LS100, but I wouldn't say better than the Doge 8. In fact, the Doge 8 is more refined in the bass region. It's more resolving. It's more, you know, extension, more grip. The high frequency is where it really takes the cake for me with the Doge 8 in comparison to the Freya Plus. The Freya Plus has a sharp edge, has a sharper edge to the sound. So if you like more of an edgy, you know, more distinct sound, then the Freya Plus may be it. But it's not like it's more detailed than the Doge 8. The Doge 8 with a TAD tube is more detailed, miles more detailed and more refined in the high frequency. And we're talking about not like, you know, $5,000 versus $1,000 preamplifier. We're talking about $2,000 Doge 8 versus $1,000 preamplifier. And if I can save up a little bit more to get the Doge 8, I would personally get the Doge 8. That's just me again. But if your budget is really tight, Freya Plus still gives you that tube preamplifier sound. It does. It has a holographic soundstage. It's a very affordable unit that has multiple capabilities like passive preamplifier, you know, capability and so on. But again, I don't know why you would get a preamplifier that has a passive built in. This doesn't ring a bell for me. Okay, moving on. Sonic Frontier. Sonic Frontier is a tube preamplifier I've used, you know, the line 1, the line 2, the line 3. I've owned it all. It's an analytical tube preamplifier. In a lot of cases, I would even prefer the Freya Plus. Whoa, there's a lot of Sonic Frontier fans out there, especially in Canada. Don't shoot me again. It's my opinion. You don't have to agree with me, okay? Don't worry. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying this is my opinion. And I just don't see it. I just don't see the beauty in the Sonic Frontier stuff. If I want a very well measuring reference level sound, then I will go with a solid state preamplifier. You know, I want that tube magic. Tube magic. That's what I want. That's why I'm getting a tube preamplifier. Sonic Frontiers just never had that for me. Maybe that'll change. Maybe it was my system at the time. My room wasn't as nice. So again, all coming from memory. So maybe I have to revisit. But hands down, I would pick the Doge 8. Okay, so is there anything better than the Doge 8 in under the $5,000 price category? So far, not really. Not really. The only thing that I could imagine that had given me a similar experience would be the Audible Illusion tube preamplifiers. I had the Modulus 2B, and I also had the 2D, and then I had the 3B. Now these are tube preamplifiers that has a notorious reputation for running tubes very hard. So you might want to have a, you know, and it's not as nice in terms of functionality. It has like a weird volume knob, and it's a nice unit to have if you like that holographic sound. But again, I remember that unit particularly not doing too hot, not too good in the bass performance region. So that's something that should be you know, very affordable in the used market. But if you can save up a little bit more, I still would get the Doge 8, personally speaking. But I'm not gonna lie, I do regret selling the Audible Illusion, because especially the 2B to my friend, because it's just so good for the money. It's so good for the money. I bought it for like 600 Canadian dollars. So good for the money. So if you don't have the money and you just want to experience a tube preamplifier for the heck of it, find a used Audible Illusion. It's very hard to find though. I've been looking for it for some time, in good condition too. Now, is it going to be better than the ultra high-end tube preamplifiers? Well, not that, I care, because I probably can't afford it, but the ones I've heard, and I've heard quite a lot of tube preamplifiers in the high-end price bracket, because, as you guys know, I used to work in a high-end retail store, and every time someone says tube, I run. I run down the hallway and I pick it up and hook it up and listen to it, because I love tubes. Tubes is the way to go. And I don't think so. I don't think this is better than, I don't think the Doge 8 is better than the highest end tube preamplifiers I've heard. There's some really good ones out there. However, I do think the sound characteristic, a lot of people, including myself, will prefer the Doge 8. When you A/B it, the sound characteristic is just perfect. And I don't know how they did it. They nailed it to perfection according to my taste in a single try. That's incredible. So, people like me, just like me, is going to have, preferences to a certain sound characteristic. And if the Doge 8 hits that spot, then, it doesn't matter how high end you go, unless, you find the exact same thing with, better overall performance, right? So better clarity, better mid-range, better bass, presentation, while keeping the same characteristic of sound quality, the sound characteristic, the tone, the balance, then that's pretty hard. So, I would go for us to say I would just get the Doge 8 and then upgrade the capacitors myself to something really high-end or something like that if I really wanted to have a highest end tube preamplifier I can find. But that's just me again. Maybe I'm just being stupid. But again, I may actually keep this in my system, I may not, but we'll find out. It really depends on system synergy as well, right? So, if I have a tube amplifier, do I really want a tube preamplifier as well? That's a question that you have to ask yourself, and a question that I have to ask myself as this channel goes forward. So anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.